Okay, good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Sami Trujillo, and I will go through the account setting in Beas. Just to clarify, we're not going to talk about cost accounting or how the cost is calculated, but rather how we are going to set up the accounts that will affect the work orders within Beas. A short presentation just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, and then we'll jump into the system. At the end of this session, I will open the microphones. If you have any questions, then it will be my pleasure. So let me get started. Basically, the whole of Beas is managed by what is available in sub-business one. So if the item is managed, you get the accounts according to the item group, then be by item group. If it's by warehouse, it'll be by warehouse. The main driver of the whole account setting is basically in sub-business one, and that accounts for around 95% of the way that the accounts are being set up and generated within the work orders. We also take into consideration the advanced GL account determination. So if you have special cases in which certain accounts will go to certain transactions will go to certain accounts depending on certain criteria, then obviously that will also be taken in consideration. But on top of that, we have some special additions. First of all, in the configuration wizard, there are a couple of general settings that will affect how this is going to work, and we'll see that. And I've marked it here, so you'll have it for reference. Over that, we have the ability also that when you do a time receipt, then we are able to account for that directly and not wait until the end of the work order to capture the account, the WIP and the labor accounts. The same can be said also for the calculation schemas in which you have all those additional overhead accounts. Those are also accountable and can be captured at the time that they are being posted, and we'll see it in a live example. And thank you. So let's go into the system and start going through the options here. So we'll start with the configuration wizard, and under production, valuation and booking of assembly, account setting, here's where we have a set of options that will tell you how the system is going to behave. So first of all, user components and transactions is very similar to what we have in SAP. If you want to use the WIP account from the components or the WIP account from the parent. And if you make a change in SAP, in the SAP standard setup, it will also affect what you get here. The second one and the third one, these two are very similar, which indicates that at what time do you want to account the cost of the schema, and we'll see that in a second. If you have a cost schema with additional cost and they are connected to general ledger accounts, at what time do you want to do that? When you do a partial or only when you close the work order? So just for what we're doing, I said that the WIP will be done when I'm doing a partial. That means posting of assemblies when I am receiving stock against a work order, but not necessarily closing the work order, whereas the balance WIP account, which is the operation that closes all of the available WIP, will happen only when I close the work order. And these are the only settings that affect the financials, except for here. And I won't go much into that. You know that in sub-business one, the WIP difference account is normally set here. Let's say that my example here is by item groups, okay? So wherever I do, the clearing account for the WIP will always go into whichever account I put here, and that is correct also for Beas. But I can write a script here indicating that if I would like a different account to be affected, or under certain conditions, a different account can be affected instead of the standard one, it's a business one. I won't go much into that right now. Know that you can do it, and I will try to get some examples also and put them up of how this can be done. It's really powerful, but you have to know how to run Beas script for that. So just for what we are doing right now, we will use the standard accounting without any scripting. All right, let's get down to it. I created here an item, a very simple one, just to cover that. So we have a production item that you have to issue a raw material or a buy item, and I have three operations. I have an operation without accounting, an operation with accounting, and also, well, so I apologize for my mistake here, an outside operation with accounting. On top of that, this is connected to a calculation schema. And let's start with here. The calculation schema is the one that we will use it for the cost. Again, I won't go much into this, but it's used to calculate the cost of the product. And you can say that the material costs come from the bill of materials, and you have labor and machine costs that come from the routing. But then you can add additional costs here, like petrol and diesel, cleaning, waste costs. Some things are just made up here. What is really cool about this is that when I add them, I can actually say that when this is reported, like I would like this account to be hit. Okay, and so this account is the water cost, and then I might have a maintenance cost here that it's calculated as 50 cents per unit, and I would like this account to be hit. But there's one more thing also that I can set up here, indicating that my WIP account, it is not just the standard WIP account used for the materials, which is set up in the item group, but I say I created a new WIP account for overhead. So I can always see how much overhead actually went into WIP at that time. And I'll show you an example of this. So this way, by connecting each one of these costs, I am able to account to a GL account. I will be able to account for that at the time we're running or reporting a work order. The other thing is here in the routing. More than the routing, it is at resource level. When we set up resources in the system, there is something called cost elements. When we set up a resource in Beas, we put here how much in euros, in this case, how much it costs for every hour or every minute that this resource is being reported. So it's 50 euros per hour. But using the cost element, I can actually send that information to a different account. So, and I will see that. So when I report this, I would like the system to hit this account called machine. And also I created a new WIP account here called labor to separate the WIP from the material, from the labor, and from the overhead. But the system also allows us to indicate that every time I post 1 hour of work, I have a 3% overcharge that I would like to put in an account called overtime. Okay. And this is something that is done internally in the company. So say we don't have to do this. I just mentioned we could. And because this is machine time and there's labor attached to it, I also indicated here that we might have some labor, and if I post any labor, it will go to direct labor, the payroll. Okay, so let's see how this all comes together when I'm reporting a journal entry. By the way, if I have a resource like this one, no accounting, that it has an empty cost element here, then no matter what I do, it will never hit the GL until I close the work order, and then whatever I posted will go into the WIP difference. Now let's see how this actually works. For that, I created a couple of work orders, and let's see them. Okay, so I have this work order to make my item 10 units. I need 10 units of this item, and I need to go through these 3 operations. Okay, let's go the first one, and let's do a partial here. So I am reporting doing a time receipt. This was done by Douglas Adams. He worked for 2 hours, and out of the 10 units, he made 5 units. And this is a partial. This is the material I would like to, or the system is indicating that I should issue, which is half of what I'm doing. I issue the material, and we are done here. What's happened? Not much. First of all, from a time point of view, Mr. Douglas Adams reported the time. The material was issued, but the time received did not create any GL transactions. What created the GL transactions was the actual issuing of material. Okay, and we can see here in the work order down, we can drill down and see which accounts were hit here. So it actually credited my raw materials and debited my work in progress material. This is obviously, and we can also see it here under the total of journal entries here, this has a value of 50 euros, and there's nothing because I did not affect the GL here. It is very clear because if I go to the actual document that created the issue and go to the journal entry, you will see that this is the journal entry that was created standard, the way SAP would have done it in a normal way. So we have this, and we reported the first one, so the actual reporting of the hours did not affect my accounting. Now let's go to the second one. I'm going to create a time receipt. I finished half of my first. I will do the same here. I work for 2 hours, and I made 5 units here. One little thing, there is the cost centers, regarding cost centers. The system actually does work with cost center. This cost center was set up at machine or resource level, but actually we could also have cost centers at operator level. So if you have different operators that work from different departments, we could actually have them have their own work center. So if I go here and select from here a different cost center, that cost center would come when this person is reporting. At this time, I just left it at the resource level, so we can manage that. But we cannot manage, and just to be clear, we only manage the first dimension of work center, not 5 different dimensions like SAP Business One does. Okay, so I work for 2 hours, received a quantity of 5, and I'm doing a partial receipt. And let's see what happened here. Okay, so what happened here is that Mr. Douglas Adams worked very similar to what he did here, the same 5 units, the same 120 minutes, okay, but with a big difference. A journal entry was created here. And remember, what I put in the system is I wanted to affect the machine and a 3% of the overtime. Okay, so 3% of 100 is 3 euros. And the cost of machine, obviously, it credited my machine, debited the WIP of the labor, and here it went against inventory because that's the way I set it up. I can see this journal entry already here. with all the journal entries. And from here, by the way, if you click on edit, it will actually bring you to the actual journal entry that was created in Sub-Business 1. This is just a reflection of what that is. So you can see all the accounts that were taken into consideration. And just to show you, we have some UDF fields here that connected to the apps to the specific work order. And as you saw before here, we also see the cost center that was selected and is now part of the journal entry that was raised or created. Okay, so that is the difference between maintaining and not maintaining. As I am progressing within the work order, obviously I can see my journal entries here, but there's one more thing I can see. If I double click here on the position and I go to the journal tab, I can see what are the balances of my current accounts so far. So my labor WIP is 103 euros. My material WIP is 50 euros. I have, and these are the other three accounts that have been hit. So I have debited my raw material, debited my overtime cost, and debited my machine costs. Okay, and as I go forward, this will be updated, and we will see a little more. Now there is one more thing here. This is an outside operation. This is an operation performed by a subcontractor. When you have an outside operation in Sub-Business 1 in Beas, you have to have a supplier here. This is the supplier that will perform the job for you, and a non-inventory item here just to represent the cost of the product. Okay, so if I'm sending whatever I make, I'm sending it out to be polished or to be grinded or to be painted, then it indicates here that it costs me 5 euros for every piece that I actually make, but that is a cost, it's not material or anything. If I decide to put a cost element here, something interesting will happen, and I'll show you. So I'm going to do it in a quick and dirty way. So I would like to release a purchase order against my supplier, for this work order. So I selected a purchase order, and now I have a PO in the system. Okay, so far so good. If I look at the PO I created, it is a standard PO in Sub-Business 1, but just remember that this item is a non-inventory item. So basically what will happen is that when I receive this job, I am not expecting to have any stock transactions. I will only have the expense posted when I post the invoice or when I raise the invoice. Okay, so at this point nothing will happen. However, because I put here a cost element, I would like some accounts to be hit at the time I do a quote unquote stock receipt from external production. So if I go here and do a goods receipt and receive 5, as we have been doing so far, and create a goods receipt, this is, as I mentioned, a standard goods receipt in Sub-Business 1. And as you can see, obviously there is no journal that has been created here, because from an SAP point of view, this is completely a transaction that does not create a journal entry. But here in Beas, because of the cost of the cost element, I actually created a journal entry that credits my outside services and debits my material. So now if I go back to the position and look at the journal, you can see that additional transactions have been posted and even more here. Okay, and I'll show you. According to the parameters that I put in, I indicated that when I make a receipt in the system, I would like the additional cost, the overhead cost, to also be posted. So when I posted this receipt, because by doing the last operation here, it actually posted an incoming stock, the system created a goods receipt. Obviously, it credits my work in progress and debits the finished goods inventory, but also according to the schema that I created, it will also affect my petrol and diesel against my COGS, my cleaning cost against my COGS, my WIP, my waste against my WIP, and maintenance against WIP. And this is everything according, just to remind you, to the schema that we created before and attached to the item based on the additional costs that we have here and the accounts that I put here. What has not happened here at this point is that if I go back here, you will see that I still have work in progress that has not been reported. And that is because I indicate that the work in progress will only be cleared after I close the work order. So that is the difference. I could have done it at the time I do a receipt or at the time I close the work order. It depends. Some companies, they have, they create one single work order, make multiple receipts during the day or during a period of days, and they couldn't be bothered by that WIP, because it would create too many transactions. So only when we close the work order, assuming and hoping you close it before the month end. But if not, then you could do it if you have a work order and you start and you finish, then it's fine. You can do it whenever you want. So as you can see, all of these transactions have been posted, and these transactions are specific transactions created by sub-business one. Okay, just to finalize this and give you an idea, I will close this work order. I don't want to report it anymore. Close document. And show you what happened here. When I close the document, then the system books all the differences. That is the parameter I put here. I am expecting that my WIP is currently zeroed out, and that is exactly the case. The system has cleared out all my WIP accounts, all of them, okay, and put it in the variance. And as you can see here, this is the transaction that was created. It cleared out my labor, material, and overhead WIP and put it in the standard. By the way, this is the standard variance account that was set up in sub-business one. And as I mentioned before, you could have written a script to select a different one or to break it down some other way. What cannot be done, and that I must say, you cannot have multiple variances on the same work order. You can only have one variance account that can be different from work order to work order depending on some parameters or whatever reasons you might have. Okay, but on a single given work order, you can only have one variance that will clear out your WIP account. And these are the additions that we have in Beas just to manage, to be able to manage more closely the work orders. Most of the companies, at least that I've been in touch with, that actually use this are the companies that have work orders that run for a very long time, and they need to manage their accounting, very closely, and the WIP very closely. So they would like the labor to be posted and also the overheads. And at the end of the month, they check against the actuals and see how far they are and just create manual transactions just to balance them out.